When the doctor was examining somebody on the deathbed, leaned over and heard with the stethoscope, tried to look at the movements of breathing, and then told the relatives, "I am sorry, he is no more." And then the patient whispered, "No, I am alive." And then the doctor said, "Who is the doctor?" Well, that is what pride is. Pride of authority, pride of knowledge, pride of infallibility. We face a situation where all the qualities, all the resources of which we were proud fail us. None of them can help us out of that situation. In our current series of talks based on a compilation of the mother's works, The Great Adventure, today we shall take up a passage on page 56 of this book. The passage is entitled Pride and Vanity. And in this passage the mother says, "For the sage or the saint who is quite infatuated with his own importance and his own worth and full of pride and vanity, there is not much chance that the divine will manifest in him, for there is no place for the expression of the divine. There is no place except for the important personality of the wise man and his moral worth. Naturally, there is a state in which one may be perfectly pure, perfectly wise, and be in contact with the divine. But then, that means that one has reached a certain degree of perfection and lost the sense of one's personal importance and personal worth. I believe that is most important. The greatest obstacle to the contact with the divine is pride and the sense of one's personal worth, one's personal capacities, personal power. The person becomes very big, so big that there is no place for the divine. Know that only truly important thing is the intensity of the aspiration. And this intensity of aspiration comes in all kinds of circumstances. That pride and vanity are undesirable is something that is common sense, and we all hear about it. But all the same, it is a weakness of which it's very easy to be a victim. And most of us are. I am no exception. The effects of pride, or the fact that a person has that type of pride or vanity, are generally quite obvious if one just scratches below the surface. In spite of a surface humility, the person has faith and belief. The person is fully convinced that he is perfect. He has no flaws. Even if he is imperfect or has flaws, they are minor, unimportant. Others have many more. And the person feels that he knows all. And even if he does not know something, he generally does not want to know more. He can't tolerate a difference of opinion, and always feels that he has the last word. There's only one way to think about every issue, and that is his way. There's a joke about doctors. A little argument with the doctor, and he says, "Tell me, who is the doctor? Do you know more than me?" And the extreme case is when the doctor was examining somebody on the deathbed, leaned over and heard with the stethoscope, tried to look at the movements of breathing, and then told the relatives, "I am sorry, he is no more." And then the patient whispered, "No, I am alive." And then the doctor said, Who is the doctor? Well, that is what pride is. Pride of authority, pride of knowledge, pride of infallibility. And if that is so terrible in the ordinary world, spiritual pride is in fact much worse and much more deadly. And that is what this passage is primarily about. Let's go over this passage a little slowly. For the sage or the saint who is quite infatuated with his own importance and his own worth and full of pride and vanity, there is not much chance that the divine will manifest in him, for there is no place for the expression of the divine. We are all a manifestation of the divine, but then an imperfect manifestation, and if we have to manifest the divine better, we have to be open to the divine influence, we have to be receptive to it. And to be receptive, the first thing is that we should be conscious of our fallibility, conscious of our drawbacks, conscious of our flaws. If a person has that pride because of a self-perceived belief in his invincibility, in his perfection, then where is the place for manifesting the divine more? He hasn't left any room for it. That's what the mother is telling us here. There is no place except for the important personality of the wise man and his moral worth. The person is all full of himself, his own worth, and whatever he is worth that much. There's no place for any more, any further improvement, any further enhancement in his value or in his worth. How can he manifest the divine when the divine itself is so humble? The divine is not proud. The divine has chosen to limit itself to an enormous degree, limit itself even in dead matter. The all-knowing, all-powerful divine hides itself so effectively in matter that seems to be dead and not knowing anything, not being able to do, not capable of doing anything. That is where the divine hides itself and doesn't grumble, doesn't make any announcements, doesn't try to make any obvious or veiled efforts to try and say that it is hiding there. So with the divine itself being so humble, where is the place for its manifesting itself in something that is just the opposite of it? That is this vanity which emerges from the surface personality of the person, not the deepest part of the being, because that is all divine, but from the surface, because the mind can become a very highly distorted manifestation of the divine, and that is where it manifests itself. And this type of pride can be really deadly in the sage and the saint, as the mother has said, if he feels that now he has achieved everything. There is a story about a saint who used to read the Gita to a king, and after every lesson he would ask the king, "Have you understood?" And every time the king neither said yes nor no, he just told the priest, "Have you understood?" Now, being the king, he could not be questioned, but then this saint was not very proud and did not mind it at all. He not only didn't question the king, he did not mind it, and in fact every time he went back and he started reflecting whether he himself had really understood the Gita. And this went on for a long time, and when it came to the last lesson, he again asked the king, "Have you understood?" And the king again asked him, "Have you understood?" And this person said that because of all the help that you gave me, I have understood a little better than I did. I still don't understand. So that is what this is about. And we go on further with this passage. Naturally, there is a state in which one may be perfectly pure, perfectly wise, and be in contact with the divine. But then that means that one has reached a certain degree of perfection and lost the sense of one's personal importance and personal worth. So it is possible to manifest the divine much better than we generally do and become in that process pure, wise, and in contact with the divine. Being in contact with the divine means not only being aware of it, but of being able to organize our life around that awareness. Being aware of the divine constantly, or at least as constantly as possible, with as little interruption as possible. And that's how we can organize our life around it. It is possible to reach that type of a state, but when a person reaches that state, then the pride would have automatically disappeared. That's what the mother is saying. That means that one has reached a certain degree of perfection and lost the sense of one's personal importance and personal worth. By that stage, the person would have lost that sense of personal importance and personal worth. Why? Because by then the person would have become conscious of the fact that he is just manifesting the divine. All this is coming from the divine. This perfection is not his personal accomplishment, but only a fuller expression, a fuller manifestation of the divine than he started with. And pride also takes into account a comparison with others. So if this person compares himself with others, either he will find that many others are even less imperfect than he is. He has become a little better, he is nearing perfection, but then there are others who are far more perfect. And then he'll also realize that he himself is still far from perfect. And then if he also is very objective and finds that some others are not as perfect as he is, then he would again realize that they are also manifestations of the divine and are therefore capable of becoming less imperfect and may approach him or surpass him. And further, he would also be conscious of the fact that if he has been able to achieve that degree of perfection faster than many others, earlier than many others, it is not because of his own efforts, it is because of the divine grace. It is not all earned through his efforts, but it is also a gift that has been showered upon him through divine grace. And that this divine grace is not reserved for him. The divine loves all, and therefore it's not that he is so special that this grace has been showered only upon him and that's why it has happened to him. And if therefore there is really any difference between him and some others around him, he finds them a little less perfect, the difference could be that he has done some more homework in his previous lives. And that is what has given him a head start, and therefore in this life he seems to be doing better than others. But then it should remind him that in some of his previous lives he was much worse than he was. He was at a much lower level of consciousness. His soul was embodied in personalities that were far less perfect. And many others, whom he is finding a little less perfect than himself, could achieve higher levels of perfection in their subsequent lives. So in fact, taking that broader view and looking at that perspective, he'll hardly find that there is any difference between him and the rest of the universe, rest of the creation. They say, there's so much bad in the best of us and so much good in the worst of us that it hardly becomes any of us to say something about the rest of us. So with this sort of a broad perspective, all pride and vanity disappears. And if that happens, then naturally, then this person, to this person, all this does not really apply. That means that one has reached a certain degree of perfection and lost the sense of one's personal importance and personal worth. I believe that is most important. The greatest obstacle to the contact with the divine is pride and the sense of one's personal worth, one's personal capacities, personal power. The person becomes very big, so big that there is no place for the divine. Then the mother goes on to say, no, the only truly important thing is the intensity of the aspiration. And this intensity of aspiration comes in all kinds of circumstances. Pride and vanity and aspiration, in fact, are contradictory to each other. Because if the person has pride because he thinks that he is perfect, he is already flawless, then why would he aspire to get better? Aspiration means that the person has accepted his limitations, his drawbacks, his flaws, his imperfection, and therefore aspires to remove them. So aspiration, which is sort of an intense desire to improve and intense desire to go beyond where one already is, that already presupposes this awareness of one's imperfection. So if the person is proud and vain, where is the scope for this aspiration? The two are contradictory. And therefore, that's how this gets linked up with the previous discussion. And the mother says, the only truly important thing is the intensity of the aspiration. So the greater the pride, less the aspiration. And this intensity of aspiration comes in all kinds of circumstances. It comes in all kinds of circumstances. And that means it could come through fortune, it can come through misfortune. It can come through success, it can come through failure. It comes in all types of circumstances. Because it can come also through achievement and success. If one puts it in its proper perspective and realizes that this achievement and this success is because of the qualities, because of the blessings bestowed on me by the divine, because of the circumstances provided by the divine, because of the grace showered by the divine, and the divine, in fact, is the doer, and I was only an instrument. So it can come in the form of success. But then, if it does not come through success, it can come through failure. And that's what the mother has said elsewhere, that the greater the pride, the less the receptivity. You know, the more the aspiration, the greater the receptivity. If the person aspires sincerely, then the person becomes open to receiving the divine influence. On the other hand, if the person has pride, the person already thinks he is perfect, naturally does not aspire, and therefore, in a way, puts a lock, locks that door, becomes less receptive, puts a door and locks it, and becomes closed to that influence. So it's just the opposite of becoming receptive. And then what happens? How does the lock break? The mother says that the lock breaks as a result of a blow, which means that is when we get a failure, we realize our vulnerability. We face a situation where all the qualities, all the resources of which we were proud fail us. None of them can help us out of that situation. Because if a person is proud of his wealth, his money can't buy him what he has lost. If a person is proud of his intelligence, all his intelligence fails him and he can't find a way out of the situation. So all the resources, all the qualities, everything that the person was proud of fails him, and that blow then makes the person conscious of his imperfection, of his flaws. And if the person has the sense, has that little opening still left, then the person aspires and becomes more receptive. On the other hand, if the person still continues and continues to feel that somehow with my own intelligence, with my own resources, with my own hard work, I'll get out of it, then what happens is that he goes on building door upon door and creates a fortress around him. Not just a door, but a fortress around him, which shields him very effectively from the divine influence, becomes less and less receptive. So these things, pride and vanity on one hand, aspiration on the other, and receptivity or lack of receptivity, all these things are closely tied up. So to the starting point, in a way, is the awareness of our own imperfection. That is what yoga is all about, in a way, because on one hand we say that in yoga we get contented, we have santosh, we are satisfied. But then it is also a type of discontent. A discontent which is not impatient, doesn't bring stress, it's free of anxiety, but all the same discontent because we are aware of our imperfections. And it's only when we become aware of our imperfections that we aspire to go beyond. And when we aspire to go beyond intensely, sincerely, and with perseverance, that opens the door, that makes us more receptive to the divine influence, in a way that earns divine grace, and we find that our life starts getting organized more and more around that awareness. So that is how, in this page that we have studied today is in fact very intimately related to this. And if there's time, we can go to the next page, which also is on the same subject. There is nothing that closes you up more than vanity. When you are self-satisfied, you have that kind of vanity of not wanting to admit that you lack something, that you make mistakes, that you are incomplete, that you are imperfect. There is something in the nature you know which grows stiff in this way, which does not want to admit. It is this which prevents you from receiving. You have, however, only to try it out and get the experience. If by an effort of will you manage to make even a very tiny part of the being admit that, well, yes, I am mistaken, I should not be like that, and I should not do that, and should not feel that, and yes, it is a fault. If you manage to make it admit this, at first, as I said just now, it begins by hurting you very much. But when you hold on firmly, until that is admitted, immediately it is open. It is open, and strangely a flood of light enters, and then you feel so glad afterwards, so happy that you ask yourself, why, from what foolishness did I resist so wrong? So you see this very closely related to what we were discussing. There is nothing that closes you up more than vanity. When you are self-satisfied, you have that kind of vanity of not wanting to admit that you lack something, that you make mistakes, that you are incomplete, that you are imperfect. There is something in the nature you know which grows stiff in this way, which does not want to admit. So we close ourselves up. We close ourselves to the divine influence, become unreceptive as a result of that vanity, because if we are already full of this idea that we are perfect, then where is the desire to grow better? And if there is no aspiration to grow better, we are naturally not open to the divine influence, because the divine does love us, but then we have to have that aspiration to get that response from the divine. So we grow stiff. We sort of have put a lock on our door, which does not want to admit, which does not want to admit our failings, and which does not want to admit the divine influence. It is this which prevents you from receiving. You have, however, only to try it out and get the experience. So, if we have tried the method of pride, the mother is saying, let's try the other way. What is that other way? If by an effort of will you manage to make even a very tiny part of the being admit, we are a being of many parts, and our ego magnifies what we are even more. So what the mother is trying to say is, even if we make a very tiny part of the being admit, somewhere in some hidden corner or some little part of ours, if we admit that, well, yes, I am mistaken, I should not be like that, I should not do that, and should not feel that, it is a fault. That is, we admit our limitations, our faults, even somewhere, to some extent, in some part of the being. When we do that, then we find that initially it hurts. It hurts because it hurts what we have been convincing ourselves about so far. It's contradictory to that. It hurts the ego. So it hurts. It hurts very much. But when you hold on firmly until this is admitted, but if we realize the truth in this admission, in this confession, then immediately it is open. Then we are immediately open to that divine influence. The door or the window has been opened. It was all dark inside. We have opened that window which will let the light in. It's open, and strangely a flood of light enters. And then you feel so glad afterwards. Because, we might have been groping in the dark and trusting our weak vision that somehow or the other we'll be able to find the truth. But then when we admit that, yes, our vision is weak, the room is dark, and we need to open ourselves up, we admit the fault that this darkness signifies and aspire for more. The door opens, the light enters, and then we suddenly realize that it is all bright, it is so clear, it's so easy. And then we are happy. We are happy, and then we say, why did it take me so long to think of it? ये पहले क्यों नहीं सोचा? From what foolishness did I resist so long? What was that foolishness? The foolishness was inherent in the pride and vanity. That is where the foolishness was.